Which is fine. It's fine. It's a belief system. He's allowed to believe it, and people are allowed to vote for it. But if liberals deny it, like he's just going through a goth phase, they're going to lose more elections. This is not a communist country. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Picture this. You wake up, scroll your phone, and the algorithm is already trying to convince you that everything's fine. Nobody's actually serious, and any politician flirting with radical economics is just being edgy like it's a high school goth phase. Meanwhile, the rest of the country is looking at the same clips and going, are we sure this isn't real? And that right there is the whole problem. Denial is how you lose elections. If you want more blunt, no-filter commentary like this, do me a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and tell the algorithm you're not allergic to uncomfortable conversations. Because here's what's finally bubbling to the surface. Bill Maher. Yes, that Bill Maher, the guy liberals love to hate until he's saying what they secretly think, has been pointing at the Democratic Party's party's branding problem like it's a neon sign buzzing in a dark alley.
Democrats seem to be having this debate whether or not Mayor Mamdani is a socialist or a democratic socialist. Let me settle it. He's a straight-up communist. How do I know this? Well, I'm reading between the lines when one of his major advisors says, elect more communists.
And Party S and the timing is wild. You'd assume that with all the chaos and controversy in the news, especially anything involving immigration enforcement, IC drama, protests, viral clips, banned clips, and whole circus, the Democrats would be riding a wave of moral outrage straight into better poll numbers. But instead, the vibe online is anxious, defensive, way clips, and defensive, and driddly brittle, like a party that knows it's stepping on rakes but keeps sprinting anyway. And Maher's the defensive, and the Masserie is basically this. It's not just policy. It's not even the details. It's the label, the vibes, the branding. The moment regular Americans, even people who don't watch politics like it's a sport, start hearing words that sound like communism, seize Prithvi Maher's communism, seize Eoparty, abolish T communism, seize, abolishes, open B, abolish, open orders, restructure everything. You're open, and restructure everything. Not having a nuanced academic discussion anymore. You're triggering decades of cultural muscle memory. Cold War muscle memory. My grandparents told me stories. Muscle memory. I saw what happened in other countries, and restructure everything to country's muscle memory. Fair or not, exaggeration or not, it hits people in the gut. And before anyone jumps in with the usual, oh my god, here we go, you're calling everything communism. Relax, countries, relax. That's not even the point. The point is that voters don't sit there with a policy spreadsheet going, well actually, this is more accurately categorized relax, categorized as democratic socialism with municipal tenant protections. No, they hear a clip, they feel a reaction, and then they vote based on the reaction. Maher zeroes in on something that's honestly kind of genius as a political attack. The idea that New York City isn't just any city. It's not a random lab where you try weird stuff, and if it fails, you shrug and say, well, at least we learned. Rhetoric about New York is a symbol. It's the financial heartbeat of America. It's the place everyone points to when they talk about capitalism. Wall Street, big banks, giant real estate, the whole machine. So if New York starts sounding like it's flirting with rhetoric about private property that doesn't stay local, that travel local, we should seize it, travels that becomes the story. And then of course there's the spicy part, the characters. Because politics is never just ideas. It's people with microphones and bad instincts.
Now, let me tell you about the story that liberal algorithms locked out. Her name is Sia Weaver, and if you ask anyone in the blue sky bubble who that is, they'll look at you like a turkey looking up at the rain. But she's kind of important in New York, being Major Mamdani's chief of the Office to Protect Tenants, and since Mamdani's big issue is the rent's too damn high, yes, he stole this guy's act. It's a very key appointment in the most important city in the country, which is also our financial center. It matters that the mayor stands by, and so I assume stands with, Someone who says things like, if you don't believe in the government's sacred right to seize private property, it's over. Seize private property. Home ownership is racist. Elect more communists.
There's this locked out by the algorithm, travel out by the algorithm storyline about a person in New York politics, someone in the tenant protection world who allegedly said things along the lines of seize, out by the algorithm, seize private property, homo seize, homeownership is racist, elect more home, and elect communists, and elect communists, that kind of language. Now, let's be responsible here. I'm not sitting in a courtroom stamping that as verified communists, a verified act. I'm talking about the perception created by rhetoric like that, and the way opponents weaponize it. Because whether those quotes are perfectly accurate, slightly mangled, or taken out of context, here's what matters in politics. If it sounds real enough to spread, it becomes real enough to damage you. And that's the part liberals keep missing. They treat politics like it's an internal group chat where everyone already agrees on the definitions. Oh, when she says seize, weaponize CS, he's speaking metaphorically about unjust systems. Okay, cool. But the guy in Ohio who just got laid off and is worried about his mortgage. He hears seize private property, and goes, yeah, no, I'm out. Property, the couple in Arizona save Arizona, aring for their first home. Same reaction. The small business owner in Pennsylvania who survived inflation and supply chain chaos. Same reaction. It's not about the footnotes. It's about the alarm bell. And this is where Ma goes for the jugular. He argues Democrats keep pretending the far left wing is either tiny, irrelevant, or just being theatrical. Like, they're just kids with posters. They'll grow out of it. But he's saying no. If you keep letting the loudest, most radical sounding Arizona, our sounding voices set the tone. You don't get to act shocked when the entire party gets painted with that brush. That's politics. Your opponents don't need a fair argument. They need a sticky one.
Private property, especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy. Really? Even among the 20 million black Americans who own their own home? I mean, these are the kind of utterances I might forgive as something a dumb white girl said while she was at Bryn Mawr. Because it's the kind of privilege hating you can only learn for $95,000 a year. But these are statements made as an adult. Yes, for co-eds from elite private colleges, you're only a lesbian until graduation, but the communism lasts a lifetime.
Let's talk about why communism, I-sounding communism's, such a politically radioactive word in America. Because it's not just economics, communism economics, it's identity. America's whole self-image is built on this idea of individual freedom. Private property, starting a business, owning a home, climbing the ladder, even if the ladder is wobbly and unfair. So when people hear rhetoric that sounds like centralized economics, centralized control, forced redistribution, go centralist redistribution, government deciding winners and losers, it triggers this very specific fear. I'm not going to be in control of my life anymore. And yes, there are a million counter-arguments, but capitalism has problems. True, but inequality is real. True, but healthcare is broken. True, but housing is insane. Also true. Nobody's denying those problems exist. The question is, how do you fix them without sounding like you want to bulldoze the entire system and replace it with something that feels like a historical rerun of disasters? Because history, fairly or unfairly, hangs over this conversation like a storm cloud.
Which is fine. It's fine. It's a belief system. He's allowed to believe it, and people are allowed to vote for it. But if liberals deny it, like he's just going through a goth phase, they're going to lose more elections. This is not a communist country.
Ma brings up Venezuela as the cautionary tale. And again, let's keep our brains switched on. Venezuela didn't collapse because someone suggested a social program. Iron distribution, or program, collapsed because of a mix of extreme state intervention, corruption, dependency on oil, authoritarian drift, mismanagement, sanctions debates, the programmed debates, and whole messy stew. But here's why the reference works politically. It's short-horse debates, and shorthand and. We tried the state shorthand. State controls everything path A state path, and it got ugly. The average voter doesn't want a graduate seminar. They want a gut check. Could this blow up? And when you've got shortages, inflation, capital flight, PO path, flight, and pull fleeing. Those are nightmare images that make voters slam the brakes. Now, does that mean any policy left of Ronald Reagan equals Venezuela? Obviously not. That's a dumb argument. But does it mean you should casually toss around rhetoric that makes it easier for your opponents to say, see, they want to do that here? Flight and? Also, obviously not. And that's what Maher is screaming about. Stop handing your enemies free ammo.
It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Here's where it gets interesting though, because Maher isn't even saying no to the social programs. He actually makes a point a lot of people forget. America already has a bunch of socialist-looking things baked in. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food assistance, veteran benefits, PL grants, farm subsidies, emergency bailouts, public schools, infrastructure. Like it or not, the US is a capitalist country with a safety net stapled onto it because pure raw capitalism is sharp. It cuts people, and most voters accept that trade-off. Keep the engine, soften the edges. But the difference, according to Maher, is between softening the edges and tearing out the engine. And that's the line Democrats keep letting their loudest activists blur.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more.
He also throws shade at the whole democratic socialism is like a dating profile thing, which is honestly a perfect analogy for YouTube because you can see it. The profile looks amazing. Free healthcare, affordable housing, fairness, equality, everyone thriving, birds chirping, sun shining, your skin clears up, your ex texts you, I miss you. But then you meet it in real life, and it's like, wait, who's paying? Who's running it? What happens when costs explode? What happens when incentives change? What happens when bureaucracy metastasizes? He uses the Vermont single-payer attempt as an example. Again, not to dunk on the idea of healthcare reform, but to highlight how even a small state found it hard to pull off financially and politically. 7.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor fuck in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
And that's the part that makes moderates nervous. Not the goal, but the implementation. People can support everyone having healthcare and still be terrified that the government will run everything and it'll be fine. Trust me. And this is the part where Democrats keep stepping on rakes. They assume the public will patiently separate the brand from the product. They think voters will go, oh, that's not real communism. It's just a rhetorical flourish, or that's just one activist, or that's just Twitter. But voters don't do that. Voters see a fire, and they smell smoke, and they walk away from the building. Now, let's bring this back to the generational thing because the transcript makes a sharp point. People assume millennials and Gen Z will automatically love anything labeled socialist because they're progressive and angry at the system. But younger voters are also extremely practical in one key way. They are terrified of instability. They've watched rent explode, watched inflation bite, watched job markets shift, watched tech layoffs, and watched AI eat careers. So when you say, we're going to radically restructure the economy, they don't all cheer. A lot of them go, cool, but will I still have a job? Will groceries get worse? Will my rent get better, or is this going to backfire and make it worse?
They were petrified of COVID, masking 2-year-olds who never would have died from it and keeping schools closed for far too long. They're definitely afraid of their kids, who from time immemorial have always come up with bad ideas. They're kids. Thinking up stupid shit is what they do. But parents used to tell them, that's ridiculous. The world doesn't work that way. Not today's parents. They say, you're right, honey. Gender is just a social construct. Please, sometimes your mother and I forget which one of us has the...
That's why the label problem is so dangerous. It doesn't just scare older voters who live through the Cold War vibes. It scares younger voters who don't want to gamble their entire future on a political experiment that sounds good on a poster. And then there's the cultural side of it, which Ma loves to poke at. The woke politics piece. The idea that Democrats got so wrapped up in purity tests, identity battles, and activist language that normal people started feeling like they needed a translator just to watch the news. And instead of stepping back and going, okay, maybe we got a little weird, some factions doubled down. And Mars's warning is basically, you can't win national elections by making the center feel like they're walking through a minefield. The transcript brings up the TikTok/parents/kids angle. Kind of a messy rant, but the core idea is this. A lot of politics today feels like politicians are terrified of their own base, like they're being policed by the loudest online voices. And when even a Democrat with solid progressive credentials says something mild like, hey, maybe fairness in sports should matter, suddenly there's outrage, resignations, and internal chaos that looks insane to normal voters. It looks like a party being run by the comment section. So what's the real takeaway from all this? It's never not progressive. It's never reforming anything. It's not ignoring inequality. The takeaway is branding matters more than you want to admit. And your coalition is bigger than your activists. If your messaging makes America sound like it's about to become some centralized economic command structure, whether that's true or not, you're going to bleed moderates, independents, and a chunk of working-class voters who might actually agree with you on a bunch of issues but refuse to be associated with a scary label.
I mean, I don't know if we're still banning TikTok. That was before we changed the rule in America to Trump decides what's a law. But I know it wouldn't even be an issue if parents would sack up and tell their kids to get off the phone. Democrats are still afraid of the mean girls who police their far-out fringe.
And here's the brutal part. If liberals respond to that reality by mocking people, calling them stupid, uneducated, racist, or whatever, they don't win them back. They harden the resistance.
I have 2 little girls.
You can be morally right and politically useless at the same time. That's the trap. Maher's entire rant can basically be boiled down to one savage sentence. You can't gaslight voters into unhearing what they heard. If a high-profile figure in your orbit is flirting with rhetoric that sounds like, elect more communists, you don't get to wave it away and act like everyone else is paranoid. You either draw a line or you let the line get drawn for you by your opponents in the nastiest possible way. And look, if you're someone who genuinely believes a more socialist framework is the answer, you're allowed to believe that. It's a free country. People can vote for it. That's democracy. But what you can't do is pretend that belief system doesn't exist or pretend the public reaction to it is just a misunderstanding or pretend it won't affect elections because it will. Especially in a country where the phrase private property is practically tattooed on the cultural soul. So here's my question for you. Do you think Democrats are actually drifting too far left? Or are Republicans just better at branding their enemies? And if the answer is both, which one matters more in 2028? Drop your take in the comments. Seriously, I want to see where people land on this. And if you're still here, you already know what to do. Like the video, subscribe, and share it with that one friend who thinks politics is just vibes. Because honestly, it kind of is. And that's why this stuff matters.